Recording in progress. Hi, April. We're still connecting to audio.
Okay, DJ Seeley.
My video won't start for some reason, but hello everybody. We are recording this session, but just kind of an overview and request is just mute your mics when you are. Oh, second here. Oh boy, that was interesting.
Let the playlist roll.
Yeah, the playlist wanted to keep going. When you are not speaking, be mindful of your background noise and distractions around you. Scarlett will be monitoring the Zoom chat, and it says the Facebook chat I will be monitoring, but we are still experiencing technical difficulties, but we're going to push ahead, and am looking forward to this session and series. With that, I'm going to stop sharing screen and pass it off to Scarlett and Sala.
Welcome, welcome. Hello, everyone. Good evening. Before I take off and just kind of go ahead and start with our class, just want to give this opportunity to my partner in crime and my colleague Scarlett just to introduce herself and share a little bit about herself and the work that she does.
Good evening, everyone. Thank you so much for coming. Can you hear me well?
Yep.
Sala, can you hear me? Okay,
Mhm.
awesome. So my name is Scarlett Ikaroma. I am of Samoan descent, and I am a licensed marriage and family therapist and a boundaries coach. And so I've been in this field for over 10 years. This is a complete honor for Sala and I to be offering this information to our Pacific Island community. Part of the big reason I decided to become a therapist is because I didn't see anybody who looked like me in this field.
Mhm.
And I definitely wanted to be a change and a conduit to know that we deserve this help as well, not just what is typically known for as white culture is the one who usually goes after therapy services. So that being said, I'm super excited about tonight's conversation, and we are very big on community involvement and engagement in these presentations. And so if you have questions, please shoot them in the chat. Even if you want to unmute yourself and ask us a question in the middle of the presentations, don't worry, you can cut us off and ask your question. So that's what we are here for. So that being said, I'm going to pass it back to Sala.
Yeah, thanks, Scarlett. So yes, absolutely. Hello, my name is Sala. I'm also a licensed mental health therapist here in Washington. And also the reason I decided to kind of go this route into this field is kind of the same reasons why Scarlett also decided to go this route. Just I went through a lot of things growing up and didn't have this kind of space available for me, or I didn't know about it, didn't know it even existed. But it would have been nice, you know. So a lot of our stories are kind of similar in that way. But which is all the more reasons why going into all of these different community classes, this 8-part series, our passion is in community engagement. Like our passion is in getting the information out to our community. So whatever that may be, and it could be, you know, each and every one of you that's in here is a conduit to your own spheres of contact of influence, right? So you take the information and you're able to share it with whoever it is that's in your field of influence, your field of your sphere of influence, your sphere of contact. And our work really in this series is just, like I said, it's just to be able to get the information out there, be able to engage our community, hopefully, when it comes to mental health, right? When it comes to this area that seems to be taboo in so many ways. So, which is why we've kind of put together this 8 inner wellness series, just different topics that we feel like are what's coming up a lot for the people that we work with in our communities. And we just wanted to make sure that we take the time to be able to, you know, to share with everybody. So as we go through tonight's class, we really encourage you to ask your questions. Put them in the comments if you're not comfortable, but we really would love to hear your voice. Let us know if you have any comments, even if some people in our previous classes have shared their own experiences. So if we go through a certain slide or we talk about something and you just be like, oh my gosh, like I had that experience before, like absolutely, like this is not just for us to give you information, like that's part of it, but also a part of it is like we want to engage you. We want to be able to share the information with you, hear your feedback as well, as we go through all of these different materials. Like we want to take the time. We don't want to rush through it. We want to take the time to be able to process it together with everybody. Okay.
Yeah,
So hopefully
absolutely.
tonight there'll be some engagement. Questions, comments, concerns, complaints. Maybe send that one to Celie. But no, for real, Scarlett and I, left to our own vices, we would be talking forever. Okay, so please, just connect with us. Okay.
And just to add on more
Yep.
to what Sala is saying is that, you know, the big thing we want to do again is continue to empower our community with this information. And you may take this information that we do share throughout the series, that it may not apply to you, but it may apply to someone that you actually know. And so that's the importance of it, right? Because you're not just empowering just you, but you're empowering those who are in your life, who are in your circle, and the extended moving forward. And so we always talk about how it's very different to see somebody who actually looks looks like you and who can understand you versus someone who doesn't. So this is why it's very important that we decided to put this inner wellness series together, and we're really thankful for King County and for Sealy for doing this for the community.
Mhm. Yep. Thank you, Scarlett. So tonight, if you've been following along, last time we had our class, it was what is psychotherapy? And these are just foundational type of topics, types of classes that we are doing with the community to, again, make sure that we get the right information out there, right? And I know we get so much information from so many different sources, but not a lot of times you get to really hear from the experts in the field. And that's what Scarlett and I are. Okay, we are we are licensed mental health professionals. And that's why we would like to be able to kind of provide our community with like the right information, because there's so many different information out there, and this is kind of everybody's opportunity to kind of connect with us and say, hey, this has always confused me. What do you think about this? So most of our classes are kind of set up this way. Tonight's class, however, we will be just kind of hopefully talking about navigating cultural stigmas around mental health. Navigating cultural stigmas around mental health. Okay? That's going to be our focus for tonight. And I always like to kind of put a list of like, I like to know exactly how things are going to play out. So for tonight's agenda, we're just going to be, of course, we did introduction. We're going to talk about really defining mental health and what that is, maybe even define stigma and what that is, truly what it is. Identifying what those cultural stigmas are, which we're going to need some help from whoever is attending tonight, just to help us identify some of those cultural stigmas. We're going to share with you guys some research findings as well, because I think it's important that we're not just, kind of going off of, what people think and things like that. Like, no, we need to, what does the research say about what's going on in our communities around mental health, right? What does the literature say about, regarding our communities around mental health? So we're going to share with you guys some interesting findings that we've come up with, and then I'll be sharing with you mental health in a context of culture, and I'll be sharing from my Samoan culture because I am Samoan. And when I do that, I just hope that you'll be able to maybe look at that information and see how you're able to perceive it from your own culture. And then we'll talk about, we'll kind of finish up with the different ways that we can navigate cultural stigma. Okay. So that's our game plan for tonight. All right. So before we go further, this is usually the time where Scarlett and I just like want to hear from everybody, right? As you think about your answer to this question, what are some stigmas in your culture around mental health or seeking mental health services? So as you're thinking about maybe your response to this question, because we'd love to hear from you, I'm just going to go ahead and define, stigma. So stigma are maybe strong feelings of disapproval that most people in society maybe have about a particular issue or just have about something in general. It could also be a negative attitude, an idea about, whether it's someone or a group, their mental, physical, or social feature, right? And that's concerning a person, a group, or a community. That's what stigma is. It's usually negative. It's when you hear stigma, it's not really like a positive thing. It's usually like these negative ideas that people have, right? And then mental health. This is I would say like mental health is like our capacity to be able to think, to to feel, and then also to act in ways that are maybe are able to like improve or enhance our own ability to enjoy life and maybe even to deal with the challenges that we go through, right? So mental health, it's our ability to think, to feel, to act in certain ways, and then stigmas are usually like negative perceptions of either a person, a group, community, or just like some people would say it's like a disapproval, like you don't approve of it or something. Just wanted to kind of really clarify that as far as stigma and mental health. So just want to put the question out there. Hopefully, we'll get some engagement on. So what do you guys think? What are some of the stigmas in your own culture around mental health or seeking mental health services?
Not all at once. It's a bit overwhelming.
I know it's a loaded question, right? Like, it's all
It
right.
is. And I'll start the conversation just to kind of break the ice a little bit. So for me, um, growing up with stigmas, we didn't know what mental health was for me growing up.
Mhm.
It was just, you were just something's wrong with you, you were bad. And part of that was the big message that I always got growing up is just like, you don't tell anybody what's going on with you. You keep it in the
Mhm.
family. And
Mhm.
so, and if you decided to tell somebody else, you had to make sure that they were like super secretive, so they don't tell
Yeah,
somebody
that's
else,
funny. Yeah.
because you were. I was afraid of course, it coming back and getting in trouble with
Hmm.
that. So it was like a really, really, and there wasn't very, very many people that I could trust growing up to share something with, because I didn't know, because I was always afraid of the repercussions that was going to
Hmm.
happen if my father found out in particularly.
Hmm. Yeah. So there's fear associated with that and what's
Hmm.
perceived about to happen. Yeah.
Hmm.
What else? What about you, Celie? What are some stigmas in your culture around mental health?
I mean, I think the biggest stigma is talking about it, right?
Hmm.
Mm-hmm.
It's I don't know, and I think in our
Yeah.
culture it's makanga to, you know, have
Yes.
have that weakness.
Hmm.
Yeah.
So
Yep.
we don't talk about it. Um, or
No,
they'll
you're right.
tell us, you know, pray more, read your Bible more.
Yes.
Hmm.
Um,
Yep.
it's typically what
Absolutely.
I get, but I mean, then most people push it aside. But for 7 years, I coached at Rainier Beach High School and
Mm-hmm.
coached a lot of Pacific Islander kids. But the funny thing is, if you get them one on one, it's a different story.
Yeah.
Hmm.
Well,
Hmm.
they'll be more open to talk to you about it. But
Yep.
in a group
Yeah.
setting, it's you never talk about it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. And I think it's kind of around that perceived, like how they're going to be perceived,
Hmm.
how they're going to be looked at, whether that's by their peers in that group or, you know,
Hmm. So Taniela said, mental health can be seen as someone who is mentally challenged or insane or retarded, and as a curse on someone.
yeah,
Hmm. That's a big one, especially the curse one.
yeah,
Yeah.
Yeah, in the Fijian culture, some may say that it's probably like a jadoo or a voodoo. Someone is
yeah,
probably
Hmm.
having a spell on someone that's cursing, and sometimes it may draw down to bloodlines. They come
Hmm.
from, yeah, from um their forefathers and go down.
right.
Uh,
Hmm. Yeah. Because I think sometimes when it comes to like, when I think of Pacific Island, they say curses is one of the things we have to distinguish to what's actually biological versus spiritual.
Hmm.
Yeah, because those are two separate things that tend to can be intermixed in when it's talking about curses on someone.
Hmm.
Yeah,
Yeah,
that's another conversation for another day.
yeah, which is so true, right? It is so true because,
Hmm.
like, I remember growing up and I had an aunt that I don't even know what kind of I'm pretty sure it's a medical condition that she had where I don't even know how to describe it, but I just would remember she was bedridden for most of her life,
Hmm.
and couldn't speak and everything. But then it was this overall perception in the village that it's something, like it's some sin or something like that. Right?
Hmm.
Like it's perceptions, around, like it's just like it's perceptions that like, you grew up with. And it's like, oh, like,
Hmm.
is it a curse, from the parents? Maybe it's a parent's sin or something like that,
Hmm.
like what Taniela was talking about. But um, what other stigmas? So I can think we can identify shame from what Celie was talking about as one of them. Just that fear of what you'll be perceived as, and then there's curse, what Taniela was saying. Are there anything else?
Well, like, I mean, even in the Samoan culture, I think similar to curse, it's like oliva of your, siblings or something that happened 20 years ago that's coming back. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
When they dig up those things of, man, for real, that's the reason why I'm not feeling so good right now.
Yeah.
But
Well, I
Yes.
think it, yeah,
Yeah.
I think part of that is because it's like people only go from what they know. So
Mhm.
that's what that is. So this is what I find these community classes important, because we're teaching that there's the other side of this, that it's not
Mhm.
just this long-term thing that's happening, because there actually are some biological things that may be happening that may make you feel sad and anxious and depressed and frantic in a whole array of things. And so
Mhm.
people are just going to keep repeating what they know, which is,
Yeah.
well, because this happened 20 years ago, because your mother, father, aunt, sister did this, that's why you're
Mhm.
experiencing this now.
Mhm. Yeah.
Does that help, Celie?
yeah, yeah. But, it's always weird when you tie it back to it. It's like, but that wasn't,
Mm.
I mean, how does that affect me?
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
I mean, that's the thing. That's the point of what I'm saying. What they're saying is like, because they're tying that back to what they know from
Mhm.
their capacity of knowledge.
Yeah.
So if they don't know differently, like what Sala and I are talking about, then they're just going to keep repeating that same information.
Mhm.
That's how this generational information keeps going, ongoing, and ongoing.
Mhm.
So you have to find something else that combats that. Actually, it's this other thing that may be happening.
Mhm.
It's not that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Whereas, like,
Mhm.
we can look at this and not see the relevance, right? We're like, what in the world? Like, how is this
Mm-hmm.
thing really, like, there's no relevance whatsoever, right?
Mm-hmm.
Because we know so much more about how things are working in the brain, the body, all of that kind of goes into the context. But like
Mm-hmm.
our, say, generations before us, they were only going off of like what they know to be and whatever they were believing of how things came about. So whenever we're experiencing things, that's what they're pulling from. They're not pulling from new knowledge as far as like, learning about the brain or how the brain works or the body and things like that. They're just going off of, a lot of the times I remember growing up, like a lot of superstitions, kind of growing up that would explain things. But if you think about it too, like a lot of our beliefs in, I'm going to use the Samoan culture, there's so many myths around it. There's so many myths, legends, whatever. But these are all stories that our ancestors used to explain things. Like it helped them to make sense of what was going on back then.
Back then.
Right. Right.
Yeah.
Yeah, it was things like, don't walk by the beach at night with your head
Yes.
down. Don't wash the dishes after 8 p.m. It's like, man,
Don't make
really?
loud
Yeah.
noises.
Yeah.
Don't turn on the vacuum at night. Don't
Yeah.
look at the make sure you like cover the mirror.
Mirror.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
So in the chat they also said stigmas or words to describe were mental health was weakness and karma as well.
Oh yeah, so much so.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. April, I saw that you unmuted. Did you want to add something?
Yeah, I was gonna share something also, and I'll kind of go off of the generational thing in a bit, but just growing up, it's like it was really confusing, and I've mentioned this to Celie before, because with mental health, like it's okay if you joke if someone does something crazy and say, "Oh, you're crazy, you're psycho," this and this and this, and talk about someone, and say that. But as soon as it becomes real, that there's a real underlying issue, then it's no one can talk about it. It's under the table, under the rug. Like it's everything's private, and then it's not addressed anymore. And then
Absolutely.
going off of the generational thing, it's completely true, because on Guam there was a school, and it was named after somebody, and that person, the school had been started as a school to help special needs children. And eventually it became a public school where everybody was invited and kids were attending this school. Yet because it was already known as a special needs school, anyone that attended that school was identified as Brody,
Wow.
which
Yeah.
Brody is not even a word in the Chamorro language.
Wow.
It just
Yeah.
became used to identify people because of this of that school
Stigma. Yeah.
that
Yeah.
stigma. So it was passed on generation. That was a long time ago, but even
Mhm.
that school was already a regular school by the time I was in school. Yet it was known to me as those people are Brody, you know.
Wow.
And Brody and maybe we equivalent that to retarded, mentally
Yes.
challenged,
Yeah.
those
Yep.
kind of words. And that's exactly what it is when you pass it on generationally. It's these kind of
Yeah.
stigmas, but to institutionalize it and base it off of just one building, and then these kids all are now, because of society, are facing
Right.
this stigma, this label, just because of the name of the school they're attending.
Yeah. Yeah. Exactly. And that's exactly what stigma does, right? It's not coming from a place of help. It doesn't come from a positive place. Like stigmas are usually negative things that people put on other people, community groups, whatever, right? And that's why we feel like it's so important that we have conversations and engage our community. And because there are stigmas, that our culture imposes on, on mental health. So then we're like, well, then how do we help our community navigate those stigmas that come up? And you'll find out later on in this class, it's like some of those stigmas are kind of tied into our culture. Like it's kind of like, embedded in our culture in a way. Right. And we'll go more into that. But that's why the importance of this is like, because we know and understand the benefits of mental health services and how that can help someone. But then sometimes it's the stigmas around mental health, just like around that school you were talking about, April. Like sometimes it's the stigma that keeps people from getting the help that they need, whatever the stigma is. Okay. Scarlett, did you want to add anything before I move on?
Nope.
Okay, so if you haven't watched this video, we usually like to put this video up because it's such a good, I feel like they need to redo this video as far as like get more people in and interview them more up to date one. But this is awesome because it's such it's such a raw response from some of the elders in our communities and what their thoughts are about mental health. And these are stigmas. Like this is literally what we're talking about. So we really love to show this video. And if you haven't seen this video from our first class, well, you're lucky you get to see it again tonight. And so we'll go over it real quick.
I think that you can talk about stress.
Okay.
Anxiety, you can talk about it, but mental, no.
They don't call that mental.
What do they say? Crazy?
Crazy.
They label you.
So if you talk about it, then you'll be labeled.
You'll be labeled. There's a mental person in your family, and no one is supposed to.
When I say the word mental health, what is the first word that comes to your head?
Embarrassment.
Okay. Embarrassment.
To the family.
To the family. If someone has a mental health issue, what's the first word
I don't
you
like
think?
saying it, but
No, do
they're a retard.
Okay.
But I don't
No,
know.
we just have to be
Handicap.
honest here. Handicap, retard, yes.
I have no idea.
That's fine.
Seclusion.
Okay.
Yeah, go with what he said.
Which one?
Retard.
Okay.
I don't know how to. It's really hard with the Pacific Islander community because we don't have words to describe what's depressing, what
The
bipolar
American.
is.
Okay.
What they're all crazy.
That's the thing. When we came from Tonga, we only learn about stress and depression here.
Here in America.
Yeah.
And when the diabetes,
if your sugar diabetes is low and you are safe, and in the island, they think you are crazy.
So some of the same things that we've talked about just now, right? Like the shame piece, the retard, like I remember growing up, like one of the words that we would call like a person that was obvious they had like maybe severe mental health issues was Basti. We'd call them Basti, and we would say, "Hey, vele Basti really," and then we would laugh. And it's like it was just like things that like we learned from. I don't know where we even learned that word from. It's not even a Samoan word, so just that's interesting. Like I just remember, I'm like, oh, where did that word come from? That's not even a Samoan word. But those were some of the, just like what April was talking about. Like they had like a word that they would stigmatize people with mental illness, right? And again, like this is just kind of a word cloud of some of those stigmas that we were talking about. Psycho, sick. You see there's a curse, like, it brings embarrassment. Um, and then it's known as a crazy person. Anybody with a mental health, concern, whether that can be anxiety, depression, they would be labeled any of these labels. And sometimes like this is literally the reason why it's so hard for some of our community members to be able to seek the mental health services that they need, right? Anything you wanted to add to that, Scarlett?
No, just so somebody added in the chat, it's also looked at as an intellectual disability.
Mm.
Yeah, because it's and it's because when we see Pacific Islanders in our practice, it's really a what I appreciate. It's really a safe emotional space for us to talk about these things, because it's one of those things we give them the words so that they can give the words to their families.
Yeah.
Like this is actually what it is. It's not dishonor. It's not psycho. I'm not crazy. I'm not an embarrassment.
Sick.
So yeah, and so and this is why it's important, like to really empower them with the language to use, so that because these are all obviously negative kind of negative words to use, and so going from here on out, this is why we find this important. So April said, it's also considered or possessed by upsetting the ancestors. Yeah.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah. And I think that's because that's part of what happens within the Pacific Island cultures. Like we tend to use guilt a lot. So we always said, you're upsetting the ancestors. This is why this is happening, because you didn't do this. So that's unfortunate that happens.
Yeah. Guilt, that's a big one. The guilt, right? Because that ties into the culture, period. Like how bringing the shame, like, oh, if I do this, I bring dishonor to my family, it's a curse, like then now I feel guilty, I'm the bad one, I'm the one that's bringing dishonor. And guilt has a way of kind of keeping us in that place where it's like, I like what that one man said in the video, where he's like, seclusion, right? Because that's what guilt does. It keeps you secluded. It keeps you not sharing what it is that you are going through internally, not even sharing it with anyone, because of the fear of all of these things right here. Because then you're guilty of all of these things right here. So you keep it to yourself, and you keep it to yourself, and it just starts to weigh you down. Seclusion, that was huge.
Yeah, and I also think an interesting perspective too, when I talk to my young folks that I mentor, a lot of it's, scientific materialism, right? Because when thunder happened back in the day, they're like, "Oh, God is angry at us." Or when there was like hurricanes and winds, but we know that the barometric pressure is building up, therefore it
Right.
causes this. But same for mental health is what I tell them, right? You're a little bit off balance. Like there's something that it's okay for you to go to talk to somebody, because scientifically something is wrong with you, and it's all right to seek help. That's but then I always get hit up with the coconut of the family. Brown on the outside, white on the inside. But I'll take it.
I mean, and there's a way to do that. And it's just like, well, it's one of those, because when people have said that to me, because I've heard it quite a bit, and it's just like, so tell me, what's the reason it's hard for you to accept the information that I'm giving you if it's helpful. And so they're like, oh, we didn't think about it. So it's always giving that reflection back to them. And it's just like, so because even when people have said that to me before, I'm like, so are you telling me you want to stay sick? Like, just so I'm clear. They're like, oh no, I don't want to. And I said, okay, so let's talk about being open to the information I'm sharing then.
And to add on to that is a lot of my young folks always said that, following, I don't want to bring dishonor to my family.
Yeah.
Like, I don't want to be
Absolutely.
that guy.
So someone in the chat said, oh, go ahead. Go ahead.
No, you go. You good. Go for it.
So I said, I remember back in Fiji, the traumas from abuse in any form is attached to someone that is mentally challenged. For example, or what happened to her and why she's so slow. She was raped when she was young, and that's how we loosely discussed it. Yeah.
Yeah. I was gonna follow up with what was Cindy was saying, but yeah, who was it that shared that in the chat, Scarlett?
Daniela.
Yeah. That is heavy.
Yeah. Because one of the things I don't think we were ever really taught as Pacific Islanders is talk openly about anything. And so it's that whole mentality of get it done. It's a lot of survivalistic skills that we do when you have Sal and I who come in, we're like, let's find the balance in that. It doesn't always have to be on survival mode all the time.
Yeah, because that's and then that goes back to what Celie was saying about what his young community members are saying about, like, well, I don't want to be that guy, that brings the family dishonor and shame and all of that, right? Then that goes back to that, because then it's like you kind of want to have the conversation with them and ask them, like, well, what is the alternative? Right? Like because obviously they're on that kind of survival mode. Like, I'm keep this all in. Because I'm trying to survive. So I'm going through all of this. I'm trying to figure all of this heavy stuff out, but I don't want to be that guy. So I'm gonna just keep this to myself because I'm over here. I'm trying to survive. And they're constantly on that survival mode. Right. So then I would even like the conversation with them would even be going like, well, what is their quality of life right now? Because that's what they've been doing, like up until this point, right? Is keeping it in, secluded from everything because they don't want to be that guy. They don't want to, submit to all of the stigma and everything that's going on. They don't want to be that guy. So then how is their quality of life? Like, how are they being affected right now by doing that, by keeping that in, right? By keeping that in, not letting anybody in, and, just for the sake of like not being able to bring the family dishonor. Right. And it's ultimately it's one of those things where it's like, just kind of having the conversation with our young people and being like, is there an alternative for you then? Because if this is what you've been doing, how has it been working out for you? If you're telling me right now that, oh yeah, well, it's peachy fine. I don't want to be that guy, so I'm gonna keep it in, and yeah, my life is fine. Right now, I'm like, okay, then we don't got any issues. But if it is affecting, if what you are holding on to is affecting your quality of life, is that something that you want to change? Right? Is there another alternative then? And that's where we come in, as far as like where we come in and kind of like, hey, point them to the right direction and see how we can help them navigate all of these different stigmas that's coming up for them. Because for this person, the big stigma is bringing the family dishonor, right? And so we start having conversations about how do we navigate that stigma for you. And I think like there's a lot of insight that could come from that, and a lot of healing too. Because we can generalize and just talk about stigmas in general, but in that sacred space between you and the therapist, and they're able to open up about that dishonor and where that deep shame comes from, that's where we start to kind of have those conversations, and that's where we start to have the healing. That's where we start to do the work, right? Because it goes deeper than that. Good conversation. Anything that you wanted to add before we move on, Skylar?
Nope, you're good.
All right, so just gonna play this, short clip I found on, somebody had sent me this clip on TikTok or something, and they're like, hey, like mental health, Sala, you're a therapist. Maybe this would be funny. So I was like, I can use this video in my presentation. So here we go. But I think it's a short, kind of like a lightweight way of kind of looking at, you'll see. We'll see what you guys think about it. Here we go.
Hey! Shh! Why you look sad? Huh?
It's nothing.
Oh, okay.
Mom. Mom.
Hi, see? Ah! Hi. Why you crying?
Do you know I have mental issues?
Yeah. I know you're mental. Your dad knows you're mental. The whole family, we always talk about you. We say, hey, he's kind of mental. Hey, mental issues? Yes, mental is you. You are mental.
Say, Mom, I'm being serious. Like I have depression. What should I do?
You just said it.
What?
You said you have depression. So just take a deep breath in and a deep breath out.
I have anxiety.
Oh, how exciting. Are you excited? What are you excited for, son?
You know what? Never mind.
Okay, love you, son. Hallelujah! Praise the Lord.
Yes. So I thought when I saw this, I was like, wow, because sometimes this is what our young people are going through. They're not being taken seriously. Right. And that's what I get a lot too, as far as like, and here's the thing, it's across the board. Like white kids, black kids, brown kid, it is across the board. When our young people bring up like, oh, I am depressed or I have anxiety, like the response from their parents is it's not a real thing. They're just kind of like the response is they're not being taken seriously. So when I saw this video, I was like, wow, this is like it's lightweight and it's like it's funny, but I think it's a good way to point out how sometimes like even with our parents in our families, we're not being taken seriously whenever we bring up anything that has to do with mental health, right? What about Is? What are some thoughts that came up for you from this short clip?
Yeah, I follow this dude on TikTok, but I like how it ended with the praise and worship.
Mhm.
Back to, back to center,
Mhm.
back to Jesus.
Yeah. Yeah. Because sometimes is it like we're just kind of like pushing it off, right? And we're like, oh yeah, everything is fine. And like, all right, going back into like, yes, we're just gonna, do what we do.
Or
Right?
you need to pray more. You need to read your Bible more.
Yeah.
Just you got to
Mhm.
center yourself.
Mhm.
Mhm.
Yeah.
I think part of that is also why it's hard for um, kids to talk to their parents because even though it's funny, it's also highly dismissive.
Mm-hmm.
You
Yeah,
know,
very.
and so when somebody feels dismissed, they don't want to
Nope.
interact anymore.
No, they don't.
They're shut down. And
Mm-hmm.
so then it's unfortunate because when something worse happens,
Yes.
and then they're like, oh, we should have took him more seriously. And when I always
Mm-hmm.
talk with parents about it's
Mm.
important to pay attention the first time they get because
Yep.
that's when they're serious.
Right. Yep. And it builds up. Absolutely. Yeah.
Mhm.
And feeling dismissed, that and I mean they're already vulnerable just opening up, period. It's
Mhm.
hard. Like there's so much, it takes a lot they're going against the culture that doesn't acknowledge it. They're going against all of this, right? And then to be able to like, okay, you're fine. Oh, okay. And just kind of taking that and brushing it off and then continue on with our day. Right. So absolutely. Absolutely. All right. Moving on. Oops.
Hey!
All right, moving on. All right, sharing some research findings around our communities and just, oops, and that went back. Trying to take off this picture. Okay. Research findings. Racial and ethnic minorities in the U.S. are less likely than white people to be able to seek mental health treatments, and they are more likely to delay treatment until symptoms are severe. So we wait until, and I mean, in my own sharing of my own story, like I've seen this with my aunties, uncles, and most of my family. Like they will not go for like regular checkups, but it's like they'll wait until something is like there is really, really bad with them, and then they'll make that trip to the hospital, right? So they don't, it's not a like they're not into the whole preventative type of seeking help thing. It's no, I'm just gonna wait until it's like I can't do anything anymore and the Motrin is not working and ibuprofen isn't working, and then okay, now we can go to the hospital. So we're less likely to seek mental health treatment, and we're more likely to delay treatment until our symptoms are severe. It also affects how we express our symptoms and how we cope in the range of our community and our family supports. Asian Americans and PIs, we have the lowest rate of utilization of mental health services of all minority groups. So that means we hardly go to therapy. That's what that means. That's what that research finding means. It means that in our AAPHI communities, we seek out mental health services the least out of all the minority groups. Okay. Any questions just about these findings? And of course, no study has addressed the rates of mental health disorders for Pacific Islanders, and I think that is due to that's due to the low utilization of our mental health services. Like we're not able to track it because not a lot of our community members, not a lot of our people go to the services to take advantage of the services.
In the chat, someone said because majority feel that therapy is going to church.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
Mm-hmm. They're more likely to maybe even talk to their pastor about things, which is it's sad in of itself, because sometimes it's like our pastors, yes, they are there to guide us in spiritual things and things like that, but when it comes to mental health disorders, like that is way, way, way outside of their scope of practice, right? Like that's but of course, like religious, spiritual guidance and encouragement aside from that, but we're talking mental health disorders, and you are seeking the help of your pastors who are not equipped to be able to help you in that area.
Or they just, oh, go ahead, Scarlett.
No, I was just going to add, it's one of the things that we talk about, that going to church cannot be the only solution. It can be part of the solution.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
Go ahead, Celie.
No, I was gonna say, or they like recommend like traumatic like suggestions. I remember speaking to my minister, but he was talking about how they were doing this like exorcism type prayer. There's like 4 or 5 sessions. They were gonna try to pray the demons out of me. I was like, bro, that sounds no thank you. Sounds crazy. Like I don't want to do that. But this was me kind of sharing my struggles with him. And then another thing I would add is I don't think us Islanders value the cost of what treatment is. Like, oh, how much is this? $360. I mean,
Oh no.
Yeah. Well, I think because we're such a community collectivistic society in the PIs, it is really hard to look at our self-worth as an investment, because we're always to think about the community first.
Mm-hmm.
So part of what we'll talk about in here is what I've shared before, is just like, if we actually take care of ourselves first, we are actually better to the community rather than vice versa.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, I mean, I got separated in November 2020 at like, you know, the height of the pandemic. But part of our separation was me seeing a counselor. I don't think I took it seriously though, but whatever. Um, but I met with like four
Okay.
counselors. I think I was paying an average of $220. But then I was like, man, let's not talk about me. Let's talk about you. How was your day? But
Hmm.
I think a lot of that was just avoidance, and then I eventually fired all four of them. But I thought I checked the box off, but didn't work for my ex-spouse. But it's a whole nother
Mhm.
topic of
Hmm.
conversation.
Hmm. Yeah, and that's part of what we talked about. Really finding a therapist that suits you, that two therapists shop. We talked about what is psychotherapy in the previous conversation. It's like it's very important that you match with them, because if you don't, that doesn't make you want to open up
Mhm.
at all. And so,
Yeah.
and part of it also is you have to go to therapy because you feel like you need it, not to benefit someone else, because
Mhm.
someone else said you had to do it. It is to benefit you only. And really asking yourself is just like, what is the reason I'm seeking therapy? Like, what do I
Mhm.
need assistance and help with?
Yeah. Because there's so many layers before you even get to sit across from that therapist, right? Like
Hmm.
you're already going against your cultural, what's ingrained in you culturally to believe about therapy. So you're like having to go against that. And then there's so many other different like layers that you had to push out of the way in order to be right at that place where you get to sit across from a therapist. And then even then, there's still more layers because we're not just gonna like, okay, whoo, I'm here. Let me tell you about my what's going on with. Let me tell you about my deepest, darkest thoughts and what I'm going through. Like, no, it takes. That's why in that first class we're talking about that therapeutic alliance. Like, it's
Hmm.
having to build that trust, that relationship with that therapist so that you are able to be comfortable enough and safe enough to be able to disclose those things to this complete stranger that you met, right? That you're going to for these things. So there's so much that you had to, and it's a lot of work. It's a
Hmm.
lot of work and so many levels of vulnerability that you had to push through.
Hmm.
All
Thanks
right.
for sharing, Celie.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay. A few more research findings. Just in our Asian community, one study found that older Korean Americans were more likely to use mental health counseling and antidepressant medications if they thought depression was a health problem. They're less likely if they thought depression would bring shame to the family. So it's this association between mental health as a actual problem, a real thing, a real medical concern, and then a actual like medical, like I'm seeing like a doctor, something's going on in my body, like something physical that is wrong. Like I sprain my ankle or something. That's something that like, oh, okay, I can feel it, I can see it, it's broken, the X-ray shows it, and then it's like depression, your thoughts, how you feel about things like people don't really see that. So then they're like, what is it real? Is it, so it's this, they're more likely to use mental health services and antidepressant if they thought it was a health problem. So we have to be able to have those conversations with our communities and letting them know, like, yes, mental health is a health concern. It is a health problem, right? And I think once we're able to get through that and get over that and recognize that it is real, because I'm even in 2023 I'm having to work with teenagers that are like and it's usually like our minority communities, like my parents that are Hispanic are don't believe, like I tell them I have anxiety, I have severe anxiety, and they're like, no, I don't believe you, I don't it's not a real thing, so it's not being acknowledged as real. Chinese Filipino people are more likely to seek official or professional help if they had good social networks. So, and I posed this question like, what does that say about the importance of our connection to our community, especially in our, minority cultures where we are collectivistic in nature? We value like getting around people, like a lot of people, people that look like us, eat same food as we do. We value that stuff, right? Like We really want that. So people in China, this research finding was saying like Chinese and Filipino people, they're more likely to seek official or professional help if they had good social networks. So it really kind of speaks to the importance of community and what community can do for us, right? Like and having much more openness in our communities around mental health. Another study found that Korean and Vietnamese participants didn't have access to medical staff who shared their culture. So one of the in this study, like it was that nobody, like they weren't comfortable seeking these services because they didn't see anybody that looked like them, that represented them, that understood them. Right. So then again, like this is another barrier, another reason why people aren't kind of like seeking help, and the importance of being able to find the support um, or for mental health programs that are much more culturally sensitive, right? Organizations that are able to offer maybe mental health therapists that are of color that people are comfortable with. Yeah. What are some of you guys' thoughts on any of these, pretty much? Any thoughts or questions? Scarlett, you wanted to add anything?
Just, I mean, out of all this, and particularly aside, it for me, what really sticks out is the importance of representation. You know.
Absolutely. All right. And why Scarlett and I are here, because we represent it hard.
Exactly.
That's why we're here, okay? Because we want to represent so that y'all can know you have some therapists that look like you, okay? All right, so this is the part I was talking about. So the picture that you see is that of a Samoan Fa'alitalimalo. Samoan Fa'alitalimalo is a Samoan meeting house. So this is, all the families in Samoa, like they have these traditional meeting house. Like every family have these. This is where they conduct all of the traditional ceremonies, welcoming ceremonies, anything that has to do with the family, any event. It's usually done in these Fa'alitalimalos. There's so many different versions of it. So the Father Talimalo drawing that's in the center right here, so it's a therapeutic approach, or it's a model that was proposed by a Samoan psychologist in New Zealand. Okay, right? And and I really wanted to share this because I feel like it accurately kind of portrays the foundational concepts that are important in the Samoan culture. And I'll speak on this slide as far as like trying to connect that Samoan and mental health and where mental health is in the Samoan culture. But if you're of a different culture, I wonder if there's some significance in your own culture, like that you're able to kind of make the same connection as well. But I really wanted to share this. The main point of this is, so this guy, he did like research on what are the foundational important concepts in the Samoan culture. And then I thought it was interesting to share with you how he found psychological well-being, emotional well-being is all the way at the back. Like this is like the back two poles of the Samoan guest house, right? And he's like, and it signifies like where kind of collectively, like where mental health is, psychologically, emotional well-being, like where our culture, where the Samoan culture, how we see and portray mental health and its importance. It's kind of in the back burner, right? It's not really in the front here with gifting. It's not up here with spirituality, right? It's not over here with honoring and all of the stuff that's the steps leading up to the front of the house. It is all the way in the back here, psychological well-being. And kind of what I want to take away from this model is just where mental health is placed in regards to its importance in my culture. And I wonder if there's something in your own culture that you're like, okay, well, that kind of lets me know where mental health is placed in my own culture, because I think that's important to just kind of have that mental picture and idea where that is. So then it kind of brings us together to this question and what it is that we're trying to, kind of have the conversation around on the topic of how then do we navigate these cultural stigmas around mental health. And so I intentionally chose this word navigate instead of breaking the cultural stigmas, because like unlike the Western cultures, the stigmas that we, like I talked about, like some of the stigmas that we deal with in our communities, like it has strong ties to the foundations, the very fabric of our culture. Like take for example the shame, right? Some of the stigma that comes up is like everybody feels this shame. It's like if you seek mental health services, then you're bringing shame to the family because you're seen as weak or something like that. So this concept or this idea of bringing shame to the family kind of goes back to the fact that our cultures, whether that's Samoan culture, Hawaiian culture, any of the Pacific Islander culture, like we are all collectivistic in nature. And that means that our actions, like as collectivistic societies, our actions don't reflect just one person. It reflects the entire community, and it reflects like the entire like family or something like that, right? So it's collectivistic in nature. So we wanted to kind of like, okay, well, instead of like breaking that, like how do we navigate around that? Because even when we say that, when we using those words, right, using those words of like navigating, like you think about our people and how they used to be traveling from one island to another. They were, you know, like you see in the movie Moana, we were like navigating all of that through the Pacific Ocean, right? We're like wayfinders and, you know, all of that stuff, or like, you know, show me the way. Um, so like we were navigators, you know, our ancestors were navigators. And I feel like, you know, if we were to look at these stigmas as like, you know, or going and looking at this from this perspective of like, how do we navigate? Because like what Scarlett said earlier, as far as like, we're not here to try and take culture away. We're not here to, we're just saying like, we have a different mental health, seeking these mental health services is a different, is like another avenue that we can navigate towards that'll be helpful for our communities, right? So that's specifically why we chose to use that word navigate. How do we navigate these cultural stigmas around mental health? We don't want to break anything, because you know we understand our roots, we understand where these things are coming from. So it's different from a Western way of looking at things, right? We look at it as like, okay, I see where this shame is coming from, because you're looking at it from a collectivistic way, right? So then we go to some of the ways that we're able to navigate these cultural stigmas. Know and understand your culture. Like I think having that knowledge of like your culture, that awareness, and then being able to maintain that awareness of how your culture kind of interweaves with all of these Western concepts of care. Like even this mental health you know, avenue, like being aware of like, okay, how does I know and I understand, you know, where my culture is coming from when I'm talking about shame, when I'm talking about curse, you know, I know and I have that understanding of where the root of that is coming from. So then now I have an awareness, and how can I maintain that awareness of my culture, of how my culture interweaves into this Western concept of care, right? And then another way is identifying. We did some of that work tonight, being able to identify and talk about some of the stigmas in our culture, because it's one way to kind of blindly go at it and not knowing what it is. But if you're able to identify it, whether that's because maybe for me, the stigma is not shame. Maybe for me, the stigma that is preventing me from seeking mental health services is maybe that generational curse thing, you know, whatever. So the stigma looks different for everyone. So identify the stigma in your culture, or identify that stigma for yourself. And then once you're able to identify that, now we can have kind of an open dialogue, or a talanoanga, as we say it in Samoan. And once we're able to like identify it, we can have a talanoanga about it. And that leads to normalizing a lot of the different mental health concerns that we have. And then another thing is just being able to have or seek out like reliable information. There's so many different information out there, especially on social media. I mean, anybody is like, you know, putting out information, or at least like when I'm scrolling through, I'm like, what are your credentials to even be putting this information out there? You know, I do question kind of like how a lot of people are kind of putting content regarding mental health out there. I'm like, what credentials do you have, you know? So because a lot of sometimes it's not reliable information. So find the reliable information. And I've listed some of these noteworthy organizations, like known out this is not only nationwide but local, and that has a focus on mental health, like the NAMI. You have the Substance Abuse Mental Health Services Administration. You have locally, you have that the Asian Counseling and Referral Services in King County. You have the Kent Youth Family Services. You have the Seattle YMCA that offers those mental health services when it comes to looking for a therapist, things like even just going on their website. They provide information about mental health and what it is. And you know that's accurate because you have licensed mental health professionals that are working within that organization, right? So find the reliable information regarding whatever the mental health concern is. Okay. Any questions, comments, or Scarlett, did you want to add anything?
Silly, go ahead because I saw you unmuted, and then I'll go after him.
No, yeah, I mean, I guess this is more or less of a personal question, but I don't know if you guys can actually answer it. But as two Pacific Islander therapists, have you seen an increase of Pacific Islander clients? I mean, are people like open to this idea as, you know, mental health practitioners such as yourself?
I would say there's been a higher participation in the community events that we have done, not just within King County, but within Pierce County. And so they're coming more with curious questions, because we've even had some individuals who have said to us, you know, thank you for this information. It's helping me navigate and determine the type of therapist that I want. You know, so it's them coming to seek the information. And so, because, you know, like I said, this whole big thing is to empower, you know. And so the hope is that they continue, whether they see us or because it doesn't, I don't care if they see me. I just want them to go, if they want the help, to go get it, because it's not about like me sharing this information, then you have to come see Sala and I. No, it's about us sharing this information and you seek who you're comfortable with going with.
Yep. Exactly. Yeah. And I would say, like, for me, I think before doing the community classes, I wouldn't say there's like an increase. Like they would just kind of like, you know, filter in like 1, 2, you know, and then that'll be it. I'll have like 2 or 3 out of my entire caseload that are Pacific Islanders. And then like, you know, they're just kind of like filtering. What I do get most of is the inquiry, right? So they will email to ask about information. And then when I do share with them the information, then there's barriers, right? Because there's like that financial barrier. It could be like, oh my gosh, like, you know, not having the insurance, the financial barriers, it's too much, you know, that kind of stuff. So that's what comes up for me.
I would say, I would say in addition to that, what I appreciate is that I will have family members tell somebody they know to say, and give them my information so they can call and ask me questions. So, because I'm all about answering whatever questions they need answered, because like I said, it's not about withholding the information and guarding it. It's just like, no, here it is. Like, what do you need? What are you trying to address? And so, and they'll say what they want to address. And I said, okay, I would recommend this type of therapist for you. Yeah. So the inquiries, I would say, have definitely increased. Whether they see me or not, it hasn't. But I will take the inquiries, because it went from literally nothing to now, like, I'm getting a lot of inquiries from PIs about therapy, which is the whole intent of this.
Nice.
Yeah.
I'll share that in seeing just a few months and seeing clients in our program. There is a lot of interest from the mothers, especially for mental health services. But at the moment, there's just so much going on for the moms that it's also on the back burner. Once we get them to a place where they're ready to start mental health services, we're gonna need you, as a resource. But just being able to share your information now is helpful for them to be like, there's still gonna be a light at the end of this road once I get over this trial I'm going through. The other aspect of that is interpretation services for clients. I know I'm not going to name the org, but we did reach out to an organization, and we're basically, they were like, oh, they need interpretation services. Yeah, that's maybe not the best fit for us. And so there's that barrier as well, on top of navigating. Some of the families we see are barely able to navigate the regular health insurance portion, but let alone navigate the mental health benefits. That's, it's a lot of learning for them to,
for sure,
on top of the other personal business they're going through.
Absolutely. And so Scarlett and I both have experience in working in what we call community mental health, where we do see a lot of that, a lot of the case management, right? So where we have the therapist not only being just a therapist, but we're also having to manage a lot of that, the context that comes with the client, the housing, everything, sometimes even transportation, to get to. So there's so many barriers that our community members, are having to kind of go through before. And that's why I said what I said, that about what Celie had shared. It's like, there's so many barriers that you're having to go through to get to that point where you just have to sit right there in front of somebody. And then even then, you still have so many layers to be able to open up. All right.
So question is, can we also do mental health events and speak to groups within PI community? I do a lot of health events, senior housing, food banks, community centers, churches for youth and leaders. I'm down for it.
Right.
Yeah, I mean, and I just want to encourage you all to invite your communities to these conversations, and even if they can't attend, please share the link, the YouTube link for this, because like I said, it just, whether they attend or not, we just really want to continue to get this information out there, because we, like I said, with what Sala said in our last one, it was just like, these are foundational things. Because like I said, this information is not typically given out to our community unless it's in a paid, they have to pay for it.
Right. That is so true. I just thought about that. It's like, that is true. Like, even as a consultation, you you have to pay for that time. Like, everybody, time is money, but this is why, if anything, this is the best outlet to be able to share with your individual communities, share the link, get them to come to the community classes, because this is a way we're able to kind of have that net audience, right? We're not just going one by one by one, but we're able to have kind of that net audience, and we're able to here's the information. We want to empower you, whether it's me and Scarlett, or you go elsewhere, but you have the information to be able to go out and seek therapy. I think in our last class, one of the participants was like, thank you so much. One of the feedbacks that we got was, she was saying thank you so much. I am so much more confident now to be able to go and get the services. Right. So it's whether that's with us or you go somewhere else, that's fine. We just, because we didn't have this, Scarlett and I did not have this information ourselves, but we would love to be kind of our, those resources for our communities, to be able to find these information. Okay. Any other questions?
Sylvia, go ahead. I see you unmuted.
No, I was just going to say, King County's Office of Equity and Community Partnerships encourages these conversations. Obviously, they gave me a bunch of money to try to continue this work, and then even after this, I think there should be a follow-up session. But I mean, relative to our team workshop, where we're going to get 150 folks in a room together, all from Pacific Islander descent, I mean, I know you live in the States, Salop, and I mean, it would be cool if we got you as a speaker or something, to continue this work and continue
Yeah,
to talk about it.
Mhm.
absolutely. Scarlett's gonna visit. Scarlett, come over right now. Come over right now.
I mean, definitely the goal is to come to a live event, and because
Yes.
it's always great to do these Zoom because it's a bigger net, and
Mhm.
it's a different touch when it's face to
Yeah.
face as well.
Mhm.
So, um, Sylvia, I know that you unmuted. Do you want to go ahead and say what you had to say?
Oh yeah, I think exactly like what you're saying. The live events is very it's just like almost like see to believe.
Yeah.
When you actually watch it, and then hear it, at the same time, and that's what have an impact, for people.
Mhm.
But just based on my those past experience, that I've done in the past, like our BI community, it's always exists, we exist as a communal, not the individualism. And
Mhm.
so it takes a person, to know their community very well. Just like, for
Mhm.
example, I'm just saying, that I know everybody, but I worked, for many years with our Tongan community doing broadcasts and different kind of tasks, community outreach in various ways, even churches and things like that. So what I'm looking at, the topic that you guys are talking about, I have seen that, it happening. Last year, I think we have maybe about like 3 kids that, as much as I know, that was like end up like suicidal.
Mhm.
And also just one coming from a nice family, but just happened, to take off, his life. And
Mhm.
then that's the time, regardless, those are good families. Not just like only we talking, to the youngsters, but it's also like we educate, the parents. For example, in our culture, and I do that, when I grow up and then when I have my
Mhm.
kids, but now I have grandkids. So, I used to yell because that's like, yell and slap and those kind of stuff. But you don't even know that I have a son, like he was always on a special ed at the elementary school. And then one of my cousins, that she's already retired, she always talk about her kids were having the uh what is that? You know, the what is that the I mean kind of definition deficit, attention deficit. Yeah.
Attention
Mhm. Okay.
deficit,
Yeah,
ADHD.
attention. Yeah. And then she always said, I never try to label them, oh, did you know you
Mhm.
have that and that, because it stays in their mind. And then I was trying to do the same thing, to my son that was having a special ed, but
Mhm.
we know, his lifestyle, but he was safe, but now he's in Fiji and he goes to USB there. And, we're so glad because we did not really label or give him the limit. You can't do that. You can't, just let
Mhm.
him, you know, explore what's the life is all about. So I think back to what I'm trying to share. I think it's nice, like that to organize, like from each, islands or each culture, like that, like a different groups, when is the best time, and then meet up, with your time. And you can come over there and just speak, It's
Mhm.
not only that, but it's also empowered, the youngster. Uh,
Mhm.
when we speak, the younger one, then maybe you already know those two because you have the experience and the knowledge and what to say and what not to say, and then also what to tell the parents, like maybe at different groups, like
Mhm.
elderly folks, so we can tell them to, don't yell at your kids, don't do that, don't blah 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 blah, or you can call them like some awkward word,
Mhm.
because you don't even know, but it may hurt them. And so
Mhm.
it's also like in the churches, I think because we don't have a government, because like back home, but here it's the way the most organized groups, in here in America, it's like the different churches, so, and then other, other groups, too. But I'm saying that those are, like to talk to the leader of the church, to maybe, and explain to them how we do want, to, like to help and, like give some more knowledge and healthy lifestyle, to the parents. How can they live? We've noticed, some of the young kids may be affected. And I think I heard one of you earlier was speaking. Yes, of course, church is just church, but also it's just nice, to share that, with the leaders and then also the folks at the church, so that way they can be able to help, support the young, the youth. Yeah.
Yeah,
And
Absolutely.
and not only that, but it's just like we can also do reach out, like in our culture, they have some group, some group of folks, it's like Monday to Sunday, like from elderly to mid-age, down to, even some young people, they already participate in the, it's called cover. Like, how they drink cover. Yeah, and
The
then
cover
it's
crop.
almost like more cover club, than the churches, nowadays, but it's because it's so influential, like one group, does it, and one group doing it, but it's just nice, that those are the group, and then sometimes the mental health, that maybe that you look at that person, but you don't even know that person, have a lot of,
what they're going through.
mental, what they're going through, because you see a lot of them, have, problems, at home, and their kids, like I said, one kid, was having suicidal, because the parents were separate. And then, and the guy was mostly in the time, like drinking kava and stay there. And then the wife is doing a living, and who is going to be at home and support, you know? And so I think the child was end up, and then he just get at the gun and shoot him, and then he died, But I have seen that, like 2 years ago, it happened to my cousin, that she's, well, they were the first one to come here to this country and build up the community in late 60s. But they're very good family, and they're all retired, from government job. But then her son was like that, is like that, and he died. He shot himself, and he was out in and out of jail, and then I think he had some problems, like with his wife. And then that's what happened. He killed himself. And then also the oldest daughter was like a Miss Tonga, unfortunately, that she's like more like a bed bound, it's just like, but it's just like, like if we try to maybe educate, the elderly too, especially if the kids in the elementary, this is the time, to give them, to educate them, how to make a healthy family,
Right.
Yeah.
Yeah. And that's
Yeah.
such a good point, Sylvia. Thank you for sharing. Which is why I like what you're talking about as far as like not only just the younger generation, but also educating the older generation in regards to like the parents, the grandparents, even around everything mental health, right? And I absolutely agree. I absolutely agree. I think everyone needs to, doesn't matter the generations, needs to hear the information. And that's why Scarlett and I are here, is to be able to hopefully empower our community and the different generations within our communities, just anything and everything around mental health. Absolutely. Thank you.
Yes,
Thank you for
you
sharing.
see the news about like I think about a week ago or 2 weeks ago, like that the grandson killed the grandmother, and then also another child, killed the mom. But those are the things, and a lot of the
Yeah.
things like the shooting at the elementary, was, like, yeah, it was all, down to mental health. So those are, and we wanted to rescue our people and have, a healthy community in mind and soul,
Mhm. For sure, and thank you for sharing that again, Sylvia. And it's in, we want to continue to encourage all of you all who are in attendance to invite everyone or share the link to these conversations, because everything that we're talking about definitely can be shared amongst the family members, amongst community, amongst your children, even young children. And so, and that's part where we're talking about these things so that you can know how to navigate these conversations within your circle,
Your sphere of contact, yes.
Yeah, all of that. So because it really starts from where you're at and it goes outward.
Yep, absolutely. All right. So our final slide for tonight, just being able to, oops, sorry, slide wants to skip already. Another way that we can navigate some of these cultural stigmas around mental health, using appropriate language. Like, what does that look like? And this kind of goes into that conversation with Sylvia. Like, make sure it's age appropriate. Like when we're talking to our 8-year-olds, 7-year-olds about mental health stuff, make sure it's age appropriate, and being able to have that conversation and explain it to them in a way that they will be able to understand. So age appropriate conversations. And it's also important to all of the resources from the slide before, the one where it said make sure we're seeking reliable information. So when you go to all of those different websites, right, most of the information that's there, you'll be able to get the languaging, right? The right language to be able to use when talking to people about anything surrounding mental health, like, and being able to use the right language, the appropriate language, it really helps to kind of dispel those mental health myths about whatever mental health condition that you have or your family have or the treatment to it, because then maybe you have a stigma, or you hear, people talking about like, oh yeah, the treatment for depression is like, yeah, do this. But then when you go to all of these, reliable resources that we shared earlier, and they explain to you, because you can even go to Scarlet and Source and use like depression, you read a little snippet about depression, and then the treatments and everything. That gives you the right language, the right kind of wording to be able to, or to help you explain to someone else about the mental health condition that you do have, or the treatment. And once you do have that right language, it really does help to kind of reduce that shame and guilt, and it helps to create space and makes it easier for younger people even to be able to get help. Learning to explain the mental health condition to your support system and community. This is kind of like what we were talking about with Sylvia and what Scarlett was saying, right? Even just Sylvia and everyone that's in attendance going through this class, like, it really kind of helps you to kind of really understand it. You walk away from understanding a little bit more about mental health, right? And we haven't even gotten to the classes where we're like, okay, this class is about depression, this class is about anxiety. We haven't even gotten to that. These are basic foundational stuff that we want to start with, right? So, but it really, like, all of these community classes, it helps everyone to be able to understand mental health a little bit better. And then with that understanding, it creates hopefully empathy with you, and be able to provide support to someone else, right? Or you'll be able to kind of get that support. Seeking support in your community is another way that we would like to kind of navigate around all of those, stigmas that we've identified in the beginning. So for teens, especially for our young people, especially, support really does help them to speak about what they are going through. So for teens, they're going through that age and that changing, that life development where they need a lot of like people to validate, things that they're going through. They're in that stage of development where they need the validation, right? So when teens, like, for you to be able to like reach out to community, or even create communities where it welcomes that, right? It helps it gives up the vibe to our teens that like, okay, we're open, you know, where we are providing, we are able to provide support for whatever you're going through, because that's literally what they're kind of wanting in that moment when they're going through or experiencing mental health concerns. And then advocacy is, I think it's more of like a bigger way that we can navigate cultural stigmas. So when we're advocating and we're, you know, like this is a way that we can continue to raise awareness, right? About the different, you know, whenever we have people, when we're talking advocacy, everybody thinks about like, you know, lobbying in Olympia and things like that, right? Changing the laws, which yes, absolutely, that helps too, right? If it works. But it's a way that when you are rallying around, you know, a mental health concern and, you know, rallying around certain rights for our mental health communities, like it really kind of gives you a sense of purpose. It gives us a sense of solidarity, like, oh my gosh, yes, mental health is real. Mental health is something that, you know, that we all need, right? That we need support with. And so being able to kind of find different advocacy groups around whatever mental health concerns that you feel like it's like that's your thing, that's what you want to connect with, like that is advocacy is more of like a bigger scale kind of things that we can get our hands in. And I'd be remiss if I didn't at least mention a piece about advocacy, because that's really important in the work that we do as well on a much bigger scale. Okay. Any questions or anything else that you want to add, Scarlett?
I mean, even advocacy in the small context is how you can advocate for your
Your
contact sphere
clients,
too,
yeah.
your clients, you know,
Yep,
everybody you're in contact with. So that's another form of advocacy if you're
that's true.
uncomfortable with the bigger one.
hmm That's true. Yeah, that's absolutely true. Even if you're like, say, a caseworker and you have a client, and even just, you know, you guys like, okay, this client obviously like I'm working with needs mental health services. Okay, how do you advocacy also looks like you kind of being able to find those services, making sure that your client is able to receive those mental health services that they need. And that's your client. You're the one managing their caseload, or that's your caseload. Absolutely. Any questions, comments, anything to add?
Yeah, thank you so much. You know, I'm so glad that I could take time tonight and tune in and listen to both of you. I really, really think that this is one of the top important topic, you know, that we need to help, because the successful in everything down at the bottom line, it's all coming with the healthy, you know, healthy mental, you know.
Yeah.
If it's not, it's gonna ruin it, you know. And you see, um, I'm so sorry, you know, take so much of your time, but I just want to add up, you know, last week I found a CD that was kind of all scratches, but from 2003. And one of them was speaking, and she was speaking to, you know, like she was a school teacher in Tonga, and then she came over here and she worked at the correction department for the Washington State, but she passed. Unfortunately, she died because of a lung cancer on 2017. Her son is Toka Valu. Do you know that, Celia? You maybe know Toka Valu. He was in a PI health board, and then he went to the Pikawa, and now he's like an artist in Auburn. But he's very successful. He graduated, you know, he was like the minority person to, you know, mentor for the student at the UW too. But what I'm saying, you know, that's his mother. And then I love listening to, you know, she was just talking about, like, you know, supporting, you know, the family support, you know, for the student. And then I got something, you know, that she was saying, please, you know, as the time, you know, the kids growing up, as they become teenagers, they started, you know, to have a girlfriend or a boyfriend, and then they start, you know, to have party, and then they start drinking alcohol, and then maybe sometimes they end up taking, like, you know, drugs, you know. And but that's their time. but you have to kind of see that's the time changing, and you cannot always yell at them because it's not going to help. And sometimes that create depression. But I was really liked, because he was a school teacher and she was talking about like family support, for the kids, to graduate from high school. But that's almost like, like the way you guys sharing, that we have to go beyond, if we keep yelling and yelling, and blah blah. That islanders is not like that they are abusing, but that's kind of more like a cultural way of taking the kids,
Communicating.
communicating to their kids, because in the islands, it's never like something never talk back, It's like talk back is kind of like a bad thing, talk back to your parents or talk back to the elderly. And then so there was this, hey, go get the knife, yeah, turn the light off,
Well,
But
here's
anyway,
a
I'm so
great thing.
glad, yeah.
Well, here's what I was going to say, Sylvia. So one of the things that could help is tell them to come to our next presentation, because we talk about know your feelings. And so one of the lot of times we get into yelling is because we don't actually say, we don't know what our feelings are that we're trying to identify. So then when you don't know what your feelings are, frustration tends to set in very quickly. So the first thing that we do is we go to yelling. So tell them to come, and please invite
the
other
next
people
one.
to come as well.
Yes.
To the next one.
Send them the flyer, Sylvia. Send them
Yeah.
the flyer. Tell them, like, look, y'all just need to come to our series, like from the first one.
Yeah.
Yeah, because even after Know Your Feelings, the next presentation, I believe, is in probably end of March, is what's underneath your anger. So that's what I'm saying. A lot of what we're talking about is these foundational things that is very important to our PI communities, because in regards to, what you'll hear me talk about is emotional intelligence, that it's really stopped being taught after kindergarten. And so we have to get back to the basics of what actually is going on within me, or how can I identify this? And we'll definitely get more into that in our next presentation for sure. So please come and tell tell your people to come as well.
Yes. And that is, that is very, very important. And I think, that's, building up our community, that's one of the things, is have like a healthy mental health. Yeah.
Absolutely.
Yeah. And also like another thing too, that associate, just to
Absolutely.
be happy, just like the elderly, if they be coming to don't want to go any places, when they stay by themselves, they become lonely, and getting depressed, But anyway, I'm so glad that we could do that, and I'll be more than happy. The only thing, I'm so sorry, to poke you silly, but, try to get some funds, so we can, spread the word. It's not kind of like what we're sharing right now. We only know what to say, like publicly. But, but those are the things, it's just kind of like you advise, and I can even maybe after you talk, I can say something, like one sentence, and then, then I can say something in Tonga, and then the other person, say something in Marshallese, the other person say, but otherwise, in different languages, because that's the way we educate, our people, because the Voice of South Pacific, is a Pacific Islanders podcast, is the main thing is the communication, spread the word, and then also communicate, that's how to connect abroad, with our community.
Yeah, for sure.
Especially the PI.
Yeah, we'll work on our streaming stuff. I have a ticket into IT. We'll hopefully figure it out. But yeah, thanks everyone for joining another fruitful and productive conversation. So we will see everybody in 2 weeks.
2 weeks. Thank you, everyone. Again,
thank you, everyone.
But it's too long. 2 weeks is too long. I'll be sick by then.